Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. You should be here for STG 204, Data Archiving and Digital Preservation Solutions with AWS. My name is Gayla Beasley. I am a Senior Program Manager with Amazon S3 Glacier. And with me is Mark Tremichet. He is our Head of Worldwide Storage Go-to-Market. And I just wanted to start out and say I'm so happy to see everyone today. Thank you for being here in person. It's great seeing people, and I know what it took to get here, so we're very proud of that. By the end of this session, you should have the foundation you need to build your archive or modernize your archive. And here's what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to talk about why our customers are archiving. Then we're going to go over benefits of archiving with AWS. Then we'll cover the Amazon S3 storage classes, including some new launches. And last up, Mark is going to call out some useful use cases for you guys in storage. Now, before we get into all that, I would like to first take you through all the stuff that we launched this week in re:Invent. It's a big year for storage, and we're very excited to take you through a number of these launches, and we think it'll be a big help for building out your digital archive. First up, Glacier. We have a brand new storage class in S3. That's your Glacier Instant Retrieval storage class. This is for your long-lived data that requires millisecond retrieval times. At the same time, it gives you that same 11 nines of durability and 3 nines of availability. We built this new storage class in response to customers who told us that they had petabytes of data that they needed to store indefinitely, of which only a small percentage needed to be retrieved every year. But when it needed to be retrieved, it needed to be immediately. And that's what we do. That's why we built Glacier Instant Retrieval. In addition to our brand new storage class, we also added a corresponding tier in S3 intelligent tiering. This new tier, the Archive Instant Access tier, corresponds to Glacier Instant Retrieval, and it has the same storage cost. Before this week, intelligent tiering automatically tiered down objects to an infrequent access tier after 30 days, which lowered your cost of storage. Now intelligent tiering will tier down your data again after 90 days to the Archive Instant Access tier, which will further reduce your storage costs. Now, we did gather some feedback from our customers about what is going to happen with the data that's already past that 90 days. Well, that data will automatically transition to the new Archive Instant Access tier, and that cost will automatically drop. And you should see that in your next billing cycle with no action required by you. And finally, I wanted to talk about some changes with S3 Glacier storage class. This is our oldest archive storage class and has been a real workhorse for archive use cases for a number of years now. And we are actually making a few changes here. First up, it's got a brand new name. It is now your S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval. Sorry about that. With Flexible Retrieval, you're getting that same great Glacier service, but the new name reflects the many options you have to retrieve your data. We also have a new price drop of 10% in all AWS regions. And last, your bulk retrievals on Glacier Flexible Retrieval are now free. So those are the announcements we've made at re:Invent this year. We're super excited about them, and we can't wait to hear your feedback. Now let's talk about how you can use these new capabilities in conjunction with the capabilities that we already provided to you to modernize that digital archive with AWS. So I want you to think about this. Over 80% of the world's data is cold. And that data is cold storage is used to retain that data that's not actively in use. And this is true across every industry, customer size, and geography. If you think about it, just about every company has a use case for archive. Whether it's to meet your compliance requirements or maintain historical data, or maybe you just need to have backups for your data protection strategy. But first up, I want you to think of every industry on this slide, just briefly. We have media and entertainment, we have financial services and gaming, bunch of stuff up there, all very different industries. But the thing that they all have in common is that companies within these industries are archiving with AWS. And at the end of the day, there are really 3 reasons for this. And those reasons are durability and resilience that are built into the storage, and the ability to meet security and compliance requirements, and that low cost that's delivered by our archive storage classes. Now I'm going to take you through each one of these and tell you about the features of the service that make it durable, secure, and low cost. First up, Amazon S3 and Glacier are designed to provide that 11 nines of data durability of objects over a given year. Now, this is a number that we take very seriously. You trust us with your most important data, and we wake up every day to earn and keep that trust. And a ton of work goes into meeting this very fundamental commitment that we make to our customers. One reason we're able to provide this level of durability is because of our unique architecture. Our architecture in S3 and Glacier are designed from the ground up with data durability in mind. We redundantly store your objects across multiple devices in a minimum of 3 availability zones in an Amazon S3 region. Each AWS AZ is independently cooled, powered, and networked, and is connected via ultra-low latency networks. This gives us the ability to tolerate concurrent device failures or the very, very unlikely event of a loss of an entire AZ without impacting the availability of your app or losing any data. And you get these resilience and availability characteristics without having to do anything. In fact, when you give us an object, we store your data in this durable way before we return any success messages to you. And we handle all this heavy lifting behind the scenes so that you can focus on your applications. In addition to the architecture of S3 and Glacier, another important aspect of delivering 11 nines of durability is what we call the culture of durability. Every time we make a change to production systems or introduce a new feature, we take the change through a durability review, which is very similar to what many of you do on the security side. We examine threats of durability, both real and hypothetical, and we don't launch anything until these threats are mitigated. We also do integrity checking to the point of paranoia. Whenever we move data around in the system, we always use checksums to verify that the data remains as it's expected to be throughout its entire life cycle. And finally, we check and recheck data at rest. We have an independent fleet of auditors that crawl S3 searching for any data that is not correct. Now, even with all that effort that we're putting into durability, you can ask anyone in S3 and Glacier, and they will tell you that at AWS, security is job zero. So with all the work we do behind the scenes to keep your data secure and protected, we also give our customers a ton of capability that they can use to implement a security posture that is tailored to the requirements of their application. We have a bunch of features to secure and protect your data, and there's some great sessions at reInvent, but I wanted to take you through 6 features that I think that you can look at to secure and protect your own data. Customers use all these features to secure both their synchronous data and protect their archive. So let's start with security. With S3 block access, buckets are private by default. So with S3 block public access, in addition to the public, I'm so sorry. Block public access allows you to implement restrictions that your data is never inadvertently made public. It can be set at both the bucket and at the AWS account level. With S3 encryption, it gives customers a bunch of tools to encrypt their data. We can do it for you, or you can use your own key management systems. And with S3 access points, it gives customers the ability to scale access to hundreds of apps and permissions and customize it each app. Access points are basically custom endpoints that you can stand up in your S3 buckets that allows you to have a dedicated endpoint for each app that needs an access to a shared bucket, each with a dedicated access policy. So now let's look at our data protection features. For S3 Object Lock, this prevents any deletes from succeeding in your bucket, and customers use it to protect against accidental or malicious deletes and to meet compliance requirements for write once, read many objects. With versioning, you can maintain versions of non-current objects that are overwritten or deleted. So this means that you always have a good version to go back to. And finally, S3 has a very robust replication system that automatically replicates to either a second bucket in another region or even another AWS account, or you can replicate straight into the archive. Now you've heard how we keep your data secure and durable, and how we protect your data. Let's talk about one more important feature, and that's low cost. And the best way to minimize storage costs is to choose the right storage for your workload. And we provide a range of storage options that allow you to do that. Now, when we all arrived in Vegas this week, Amazon S3 had 5 storage classes with multi-AZ redundancy. And with all things storage, the fundamental choice to make is really a trade-off between performance on one side and storage costs on the other. Some apps need super low latency access to data that's accessed often, while others can tolerate higher latencies for data that's accessed less often in exchange for a much lower storage cost. With our storage classes, we can break these 5 storage classes down into 2 categories. You have our low latency storage classes, which provide synchronous access to data, and our archive storage classes, which provide asynchronous access to data. With our archive storage classes, Glacier Flexible Retrieval and Glacier Deep Archive, your app needs to be able to tolerate waiting minutes or hours when it's asked for the data back. And for many applications, that's totally fine. For example, many customers use Glacier Deep Archive and Glacier Flexible Retrieval to store their backups. If, let's say, you have 1 terabyte of data that's sitting in Glacier Flexible Retrieval and it's been there for 100 days, I'm willing to bet you're willing to wait a few more minutes to retrieve that data in exchange for that lower cost. But some data needs to be retrieved with that millisecond access, similar to S3. And that's why we built Glacier Instant Retrieval, which really gets you the best of both worlds. It's an archive storage class, which is reflected in the price, and it delivers low latency access to your data. S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval is deliberately designed to have that millisecond latency, as we mentioned, which is the same performance as S3 standard storage class. So I'll give you an example. I'm an older millennial, and like a lot of older millennials, I thought I wanted to dabble in web page designs. But really, I just wanted to put thousands of pictures of my dogs online. Thank you for that. So here's my dogs. When I started building that website, I accessed it constantly. I was updating it. I was putting all my pictures up. But then, over time, I started working. I developed new hobbies, and I maybe accessed that website once or twice a year. But when I wanted those pictures, I expected them to be there. And that's what Glacier Instant Retrieval is providing, that millisecond access. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I really just put the dogs, wanted a reason to put my dogs on the big screen because I love them. So thank you for that. That's Zeke, Cardi, B, and Pepper there on the end. So now, we still have Glacier Flexible Retrieval. This is our long-lived archive data for long-term backup. 11 nines of durability, retrievals in minutes, 3 to 5 hours, or 5 to 12 hours. And remember, we now have our bulk retrievals are free, and we have that 10% price drop in all regions. And we have Glacier Deep Archive, which is your lowest cost storage in the cloud. You're going to use Glacier Deep Archive for data that you need to store for long periods of time, but access very, very infrequently. So now that we've gone over all the storage classes for archive, customers often ask, which one of these is right for me? And the answer to that boils down to the 3 fundamental differences with archive storage classes, which are storage costs, retrieval speed, and how long you retain your data. Storage costs range from 0.4 cents per gig with Glacier Instant Retrieval to just under $1 per terabyte with Glacier Deep Archive. On the retrieval side, Glacier Instant Retrieval, you get to retrieve your data instantly, which is why we named it that, right? And then you have Glacier Flexible Retrieval and Deep Archive, which you do not get your data back instantly. With these 2 asynchronous storage classes, it's really important to understand your retrieval requirements before selecting a storage class. Flexible retrieval gives you the ability to bring your data back in minutes, while Deep Archive, you have to wait hours for your data to be recalled. And the final consideration you want to think to is how long you will need to retain your data for. Our archive storage classes all have a minimum object duration. For instance, with Glacier Retrieval, Glacier Flexible Retrieval, and Glacier Instant Retrieval, that minimum object time is 90 days. And for Glacier Deep Archive, that minimum object time is going to be 180 days. And of course, as I mentioned, we announced just this week again that you have that price drop on Glacier Flexible Retrieval, and the bulk retrievals are now free. So here we are again, back at our storage classes. We talked about the 3 archive storage classes so everyone knows when we use each of them. But how do we get our data there? Now, of course, if you have data that's going to be cold from the start, you could use our APIs to just put the data directly in an archive. And a bunch of apps like backup applications and media asset managers, managers and others do that for you. However, most data doesn't start out cold. It starts out like my dog website, right? It's accessed a bunch of times and then cools down a bunch of times in the beginning and then cools down over time. And for this data, we provide a number of capabilities to help customers efficiently tier down their archive over time so that you can optimize those storage costs. For this, we have our S3 lifecycle. Lifecycle policies allow you to transition your data into the infrequent access or archive storage classes over time as your data cools off, and to automatically delete data at the end of its lifespan. This allows you to automatically control storage costs based on the access patterns. For example, let's say an object is created on day 0 in our S3 standard storage class, and it's typically accessed a lot in that first 90 days of its life, but only rarely after that. Using a lifecycle policy, you can automatically transition your object to Glacier Instant Retrieval after a 90-day period ends. Now, at this point, if your app comes back and attempts to read the object, it will work just fine. Your object is in Glacier Instant Retrieval, so you will have that millisecond latency. But let's say after 180 days, access is extremely rare, and we want to further optimize costs. Our lifecycle rules can handle that too by transitioning an object to Glacier Deep Archive. And sometimes customers like to keep data around just in case, or they may have a regulatory reason to keep data around for a specific period of time. An example of that would be the financial services, which often have a regulatory period that data needs to be maintained for, and often it's 7 years. Well, our lifecycle policies can automatically delete that data for you at the end of that regulatory period. And a number of filters that you can apply to your lifecycle policies which determine which objects in your buckets they affect. You can apply them to the entire bucket, or you can apply them to a prefix or a tag. And newly launched this week, or announced this week, you can also apply lifecycle filters or conditions to an object size, which is great for archiving because you typically don't want to send a bunch of tiny objects into archive storage. And you can also filter by version. And this allows you to easily keep 2 or 3 versions of an object. Now, lifecycle policies are great, and many customers use them to optimize storage. Optimize storage costs. But they do require you, the customer, to understand your access patterns so that you know when to tier specific objects. And customers have told us that the access patterns aren't always known, or sometimes they can be very unpredictable. And that's why we built intelligent tiering. With S3 intelligent tiering, it's an Amazon S3 storage class designed for customers who want to optimize storage, who don't know have access patterns that change. And it automatically will tier down that data for you. And it does this without performance impact, operational overhead, retrieval fees, or lifecycle fees. Intelligent tiering is the first cloud object storage class that delivers automatic saving by moving between those tiers. There's 5 tiers. The automatic access you get for the 5 tiers are your 3 synchronous tiers, and they're automatically available. And then you have 2 asynchronous tiers that you can opt into for archive. And here's how it works. When you place an object into intelligent tiering, it lands in the frequent access tier, and it stays there until it's gone 30 days without being accessed. After 30 days, it tiers down to the frequent access tier, and at this point, your storage costs will drop, and you'll begin to pay infrequent access rates. After 90 days without access, your object will tier down again into the new archive instant access tier, further optimizing storage costs. Now, if at any time an application comes along and it reads that object again, intelligent tiering will automatically tier up, and it will be brought back into the frequent access tier, and the process starts again. And that data is brought back with no retrieval fees. In addition to the instant access tier, you can opt into the flexible retrieval tier and the deep archive tiers as well. Now, we've gone over why you should archive in the cloud. We've gone over our storage classes. Now I'm going to hand it over to Mark, who's going to give you some unique use cases. Thank you.
Good job. Okay, hi everyone, can you hear me? Okay, let's stretch the afternoon after the lunch break, or hopefully I'm not standing between you and lunch. So this, I gotta tell you, it's super exciting to see everybody live here at reInvent for the first time in a couple of years, so thank you for making the effort. Hopefully, again, we're really excited about these announcements. Gayla's talked a little bit about some of the new things to allow customers to save costs through both lifecycle management as well as intelligent tiering. What I want to do now is talk about a couple different use cases with different vertical industries, but again, keep in mind that even though we're going to only focus on a few of the vertical use cases, it's really applicable to all verticals, right? So first of all, again, Gayla talked about the range and any number of different verticals. So I'm going to look in the audience, how many people from media here, and media use cases? Okay, few. Financial services? Great, a few others. So anybody from healthcare, life sciences? Great, okay. So those are just a few, and I'm going to focus on those. But imagine, if you will, you can go from, we deal a lot with customers in seismic and energy, oil archives. If you think about telecom and call data records, et cetera. So any really vertical, any market, you have data that needs to be kept over a long period of time, and in many cases has additional compliance and regulatory requirements. So as I go through these examples, we'll go through and we'll try to highlight some of the capabilities with the particular vertical, but really a lot of the capabilities are applicable to all the verticals and many more that we're not even listing here. So first I'm going to focus on the media and entertainment vertical. This is one where we have many customers, and we'll highlight a few at the end, that are moving from on-premises into the cloud. And so if you believe it today, and I've been meeting with a lot of customers over the last few years, a lot of the digital archives, even analog archives, are still stored on tape. I remember one, I won't mention the customer, but they had their digital asset management solution was a guy named Bob. And Bob had cards, and they had a closet of analog and digital tapes. And that was their digital asset management system of 20 years of digital archives. So the reality is there's both on-site, off-site. Common mechanisms that we see in common infrastructure is you have online archives, say, in some type of spinning disk or SSD for instant access, but then the older archives are tiered off to, say, an LTO tape system on premises, and then there's a second copy, say, off premises in Iron Mountain or some other off-site facility. For some of the film archives that we see, there's even a third copy of data, but those are the common, and the common thread with all of this is a lot of it is still on tape, if you believe it, in 2021. So getting from all that tape, and that's what we try to show here, getting it into all the archive classes that Gayla just talked about, well, it's a complex journey. And this is meant to be an eye chart. It's meant to be lots of paths. So how do you get the data off of the tape? What kind of transcoding are you going to be doing to be able to move it into the cloud? What kind of physical transportation? Once you decide on that, then what kind of digital asset management solutions are you going to use? All these different paths, if you will, this complexity is sometimes overwhelming for media customers. In fact, any customers trying to move into the cloud. So we listened to customers, and what we did is we developed what we call an AWS solution. So we've created a number of solutions for different vertical markets and different industries. And in this case, we created a solution called Media to Cloud. Media Cloud is a number of scripts, templates, CloudFormation templates that allow customers to prototype and take pieces of that into production to ingest data, drain the existing archive, then generate additional, in media and entertainment especially, there's a lot of value in generating additional, enhancing that metadata. For example, if you had a tape on a shelf, it just might have the game, along with maybe some keyframes on when the goals were scored, along with key players and the names, and that's it. Whereas when you take it into, and we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to help customers with that with some of our machine learning, you can take that and you can really get a lot of additional metadata enhancement to be able to go in and understand, and identify players, identify much more richer metadata to allow customers then to put that data online and monetize it in different ways. And then finally, taking all of that enriched data, creating perhaps a proxy along the way so you can keep your master, high resolution master, at one tier of storage, and then maybe a proxy at a lower cost, more synchronous level of storage, and then importing that into a modern digital asset management or media asset management system. And in conjunction with, we have a lot of customers and a lot of partners today that are already supporting our archive tiers, and we've made some additional announcements that you'll see with a number of partners supporting some of the new tiers, including Glacier Instant Retrievals. So this is quickly, I want to make sure, again, we'll have this available and posted so you can look at it later. This is also available online, but there's really three elements to the media to cloud architecture. First, that draining. So a couple things I want to highlight in terms of AWS services that support the movement and migration. So you want to think about, there's both online options. So we offer a number of services, including AWS Data Sync that allows you to point, say, at an on-premises filer, point the other end at S3 or, say, a POSIX compliant file system like EFS, and synchronize the data between the on-premises and the cloud. And think about it as, I think about it as rsync on steroids to allow you to move the data quickly into the cloud and do that seamlessly from a file system into, again, as I said, into an object store or to a file system in the cloud. Second option is Storage Gateway. So Storage Gateway can present an NFS file system or an SMB CIFS share. And again, for applications that might be used to writing to that, you can write to it, and it'll end up at S3 on the other side. So really simple to integrate into existing workflows. Also great if you're continually creating new data. And then there's some bulk or bulk movements like our snowballs. We introduced Snowcone for smaller data sets, a number of different mechanisms to get that data into the cloud to move it out. And we also work, and we'll talk about, we also work with partners. So we have a number of different, both our own professional services as well as third-party partner solutions that can take tape data and transcode that and move it into the cloud for you. So that's the step one, is how do you get it off-prem into something that's usable in the cloud. Then the cool stuff starts happening, right? Once you have it now in AWS, you can start using some capabilities and use Lambda. So whenever you have new content come in, you can trigger Lambdas then. That can trigger some of our machine learning capabilities. So for example, we can use recognition to identify players in those sports games and attribute different labels to different teams, different sports, different time and events that enrich that metadata. And then you can kick off also using some of our transcoding capabilities from us and from our Elemental teams, transcode that into a lower resolution proxy. And finally, you can take all of that and import that into a digital asset management system, either your own that you've created, many of our customers have built their own, or package solutions from of our third-party partners and APN network partners for digital asset management. So that's available today. You can go to our website. We're updating that with Glacier Instant Retrievals, and that'll be available soon. So the other solution that we've created, we've heard especially, and again, think about this for media, but think about it, I heard you have financial services, healthcare, other verticals as well, is something called fixity checking. So what's fixity? Well, as Gala talked about before, we're constantly making sure under the covers and completely opaque to you that we make sure that the data is durable, that we're constantly checking, doing checksums, doing things under the covers. However, in some cases, and particularly in media, but also for compliance use cases, you want to make sure that you can take a look using your own algorithms or in some transparent way, make sure that the object or the file that you put in continues to be the object and doesn't degrade. Now this kind of comes really in the cloud with all the checksumming and everything that we do under the covers, probably less necessary, but in a world where typical archives historically were on tape, it's super important. So what we did is we said, hey, we listened to our customers and we created a solution, again, which is a set of scripts and templates that allow our customers then to be able to do at-rest checking of those objects and provide that in a more transparent fashion. So that's similar to what they're doing today on premises and allow them to meet either their governance or compliance requirements or other requirements for making sure that there's transparent fixity checking available and that the objects are what they put in and they can check them on a regular basis. So those are two things. Now the cool thing, and we actually are pre-announcing this, so this is some new capabilities around checksumming. And you can see I kind of get a little excited about checksumming, which is maybe super geeky, but I really, really think this is one of the more exciting capabilities that we've come up with. And especially not just for archiving, but for getting any data into the cloud that you want to make sure the data integrity is there. So there's really two announcements that we've made. One is we've had checksumming, which is when you upload an object, will have a checksum to make sure that the data hasn't been corrupted. Usually things happen, say if it's data in flight over the wire and there might be some network issues, maybe you'll have some bits drop out. That's really where it's useful to make sure that, again, what you upload is what lands in S3 at the other end. And so we've had that. What we've done is now we've heard from our customers that they have a number of algorithms that they want to use to ensure that the data integrity is intact. So what we're announcing, which is coming soon in 2022, are additional checksum options with additional algorithms that our customers use today. So you can use your favorite checksums, SHA-256, but SHA-1, CRC32, and CRC32C. And different checksum methodologies also provide different speed of checksumming, so you get a lot of additional efficiencies by using some of the newer checksumming. So that's one cool thing, and I think I'm pretty excited about that because that allows now customers to use what they're used to with their checksumming. We're also doing something where we can apply that checksum at the end. So when you upload an object, we can tack that checksum onto the end, and that allows you to check the data while you stream it in and then validate it with that checksum. So that improves efficiency. One of the real cool things that I'm excited about, though, is also the ability to parallelize checksums. So this allows us to break apart objects and then do the checksums in parallel. And why is that important? Well, if you think about an object, we did some benchmarking. Using our existing checksums, we ran the existing checksum algorithms on a 1 terabyte file. So 1 terabyte, many customers, especially media, have files that are many, many times that size. But a 1 terabyte file, using just a standard EC2 instance, it took about 90 minutes, so 86 minutes to do a checksum on that file using existing checksumming techniques. With the parallelization and the new capabilities that we introduced, we reduced that to 7 minutes. So this allows you to now make sure and check your data integrity and basically improve that performance of your checksumming by up to 92%. So that's important under the covers to make sure from just media files, but also think in compliance and so on, where there are requirements to make sure that the data has not changed and is immutable, that can speed that process up, especially when you have millions of files. So I want to bring this home in the media use case with a customer of ours, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They had about 2,800 hours of video content, about 350 terabytes, all told about 2,000 LTO tapes that they had on premises. And what happens as with companies over time, they had a number of employees come in, leave, and so on, and probably their version of Bob over time that had some of that knowledge locked in their brains, but maybe a lot of the metadata wasn't there. So Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worked with a partner of ours, TapeBark, to take that LTO tape data, move that data into AWS. They used a combination of snowballs and other mechanisms to move it in. And they also did and used checksumming and everything to make sure, that, as we talked about along the way, to make sure that the data integrity was intact. And move that data into AWS and then imported it into an online digital asset management solution. And what they did here, similar to what I talked, very similar to the Media Cloud solution, there were high-resolution masters, there were proxies generated from that, and then additional metadata was taken out. And what they discovered was pretty cool, where there were another 110 hours of video that they didn't even realize they had in this process, and now that's available instantly online. And then finally, going back to cost optimization, so we can work, and especially for the media and entertainment, but really any archive use case, what we do is keep automatically the low-resolution proxies at a instant access tier, so an S3 or S3 infrequent access tier. But then we use lifecycle management to be able to cost optimize for those masters down to Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive. So this is a great example. We have dozens, hundreds of customers that are doing something similar in media and entertainment. Happy to chat with you afterwards. Second example that I want to dive into is in financial services. There were a few folks in the room that talked about financial services. Here, a lot of the elements and things that we talked about, checksumming and tiering and cost optimization, are similar, but there's some unique requirements for financial services. So some of the things for financial services that we see are that critical data sets need to be replicated in a certain period of time to meet SLAs for compliance or governance requirements. So while this isn't technically archiving, it is making sure that there's another copy of the data available, whether it's for compliance reasons or for disaster recovery, or more commonly, unfortunately, we're seeing for, say, recovery from ransomware, where they need a copy of the data and they need to be able to recover quickly. For compliance reasons, often, the data needs to be rendered immutable or be immutable, unchangeable, and be proven that the data is immutable. And then there's requirements for encryption of data at rest and in flight. And then all of this needs to be meticulously logged so that it passes audits and there's proof of access, compliance, and immutability. So some of the capabilities that we offer first, and then we talked a little bit in the last slide about some of the replication capabilities to copy that data. One of the things is customers are storing across multiple regions. And so we obviously, and you probably heard about Amazon S3 cross-region replication. We've had that for a number of years, but we really heard from our customers that customers wanted to expand what they did across multiple regions. So some of the things that we've introduced over the last few years to help customers in this area are a few items listed here. First of all, something called multi-region access points, which, if you think about what this is the ability to replicate data, but then have data in multiple, say the same data sets in multiple regions around the world, but then have a single access or entry point. And what we do is we take a look via latency and say, okay, what's the lowest latency access to the particular data set that you're looking for, and be able to then direct that request to the closest region. So that's not only useful for, say, replication of data and for compliance, but it's super useful for improving performance, for application performance. And so we've seen up to a 60% improvement in terms of performance of accessing data. Also, back to the compliance and requiring governance, CRR, cross-region replication, was a great solution for replicating data, but we didn't have strict SLAs or availability statistics on it. So what we introduced a bit back was the ability to have what we call replication time control, which provides the ability to ensure that data is replicated within a certain period of time, which is required by a lot of our enterprise customers. And then finally, we want to make sure that customers can monitor, so we added robust metrics to monitor replication status all the way down to the object level. So we talked about replication, and we talked about replication to a different AWS region, but then we also have the capability to replicate within an AWS region. And so why would you want to do that? Well, again, we talked about either malicious or unintentional, say, deletion of data, ransomware, other issues that customers face today. So within cross-region replication, we also can combine that with a capability called ownership override. So what we can do is replicate either to a different region or within the same region to a different bucket with different user credentials. So that allows you to maintain a pristine set of data that you know is good, if you will, and then if you have to recover, say from a disaster or from a ransomware event, you can access that data with different credentials. So even if somebody gets the primary account credentials, you can go back to that second set. So that's a combination and a pattern that we see quite a bit. Again, not technically archive, but for compliance reasons, especially for financial institutions, we see that as a critical capability. So we talked about the SLA and replication requirements in the previous slide. And then finally, you can combine this with capabilities like retention controls. And so what are retention controls? Well, we have something that Gayla talked about earlier called object lock. And I think about this as I talk more to customers. I spent a lot of time the last few years with talking to financial services customers, and there's a requirement, SEC 17A4, that requires that objects be immutable and proven that basically those objects or whatever's stored, whether they're voice records from trades or other financial data, that they haven't changed. Similarly, in healthcare, you are supposed to retain images, PACS images for 7 years, 21 years, depending on life of patient, et cetera, and there has to be a proof of data not changing. So again, there's this requirement for immutability, meaning unchanging data and proving that data hasn't changed. So we have this capability of S3 object lock to allow you to lock that data down for 1 month or 7 years, and then that data will not be able to be overwritten or deleted during that period of time. Then we offer auditing and visibility, and this is especially for our regulated or compliance-sensitive customers, the ability to audit and provide visibility of those controls. I talked a little bit about compliance, But I really think if you think, and again, well, this is kind of a niche case, and Object Lock is really for these compliance requirements. Don't think about it that way. I really think about, especially with what's happening today with ransomware, with a lot of the, you've got your crown jewels of data. Anybody that has data that most of the archive data is immutable or doesn't change, use Object Lock, right, to protect that data, because then even malicious changes can occur, and you can use that in combination with some of the other things that we talked about. So again, I'm just throwing out a couple best practices, hopefully for you to think about after the session today. Object Lock is one of those capabilities that we introduced a few years ago, and what we do is we see customers well beyond compliance and financial services using Object Lock today to ensure that their most important assets are protected. So finally, I want to talk about encryption. We talked about that in the opening slide. And we offer, really think about, this is overly simplifying, but we offer, think about encryption in 3 different areas. First is on the client side, we offer encryption via the AWS SDK. And then obviously customers can, you have your own encryption keys and can encrypt your data even before you upload it into AWS. Then we'll encrypt data into AWS using HTTPS, TLS. And finally, then we have an S3 encryption of data at rest. You can kind of think about that as a couple different options there. One, we offer something called AWS SSE S3, which is our own replicate or our own encryption that's in AWS. And you can turn that on optionally in the console or through the APIs to make sure that your data is encrypted in the bucket. So that we offer that. That's fairly transparent to you and available within S3. Now, the one thing it doesn't do, though, is encrypt metadata. So we have the object data or the payload itself, but if you want to make sure that all the data is encrypted, then you can bring your own keys along. So what we offer are either our key management service or your own keys, what we call SSEC or customer keys. And that will allow you to encrypt both the payload as well as the metadata. So again, these are hopefully little nuggets that you can think about of different trade-offs depending on if you want to bring your own keys or if you want to have us manage it for you. So we talked about media and entertainment. We talked about financial services. I want to dive into one additional area, healthcare and life sciences, and a couple examples here, hopefully, that you can take away. So if you think about healthcare, and I've been spending a lot of time with some of our PACS partners, our imaging partners, and they tell me that there's this myriad of unstructured data. So lab reports, insurance claims, clinical studies, x-rays. One interesting tidbit that I learned is that over the years, you have these large PACS systems and PACS imaging systems, and you think about, well, those are mostly MRIs or CTs or x-rays, but doctors actually put their own notes, so they'll actually use them as a really expensive document management system as well. So you've got this mishmash within these systems. So what we introduced about a year ago is something called Amazon Health Lake, which is a HIPAA-eligible service that has healthcare providers, health insurance companies, to import, store, and aggregate the data, and then analyze that data and transform that data in a data lake, specifically for healthcare. So what I want to highlight again is, like, when we think about archives, we think, wow, those are really cold, they're never used. And again, I think what we're seeing is that's not true. Archive data is just data that is immutable, that might not change. But again, as we talked about for media, as we talked about for financial services, and now with healthcare, you can really make use of that data and transform that data and help customer and patient outcomes. So let me talk a little bit about what we're doing and maybe an example architecture that you can take with you. Again, this is a healthcare example, but again, I think this applies to anybody with archive data. So what we can do is use a number of tools within AWS to be able to access that data. And the cool thing is, if you link this back to what Gayla talked about before with Glacier Instant Retrievals, what you might be able to do is take, say, Amazon Rekognition or Amazon Textract or Amazon Transcribe and scan those archives, right? And then you can keep that data available instantly later as you create that metadata to be able to pull that data back based on the queries. So without having that synchronous or asynchronous delay with Glacier Flexible Retrievals or Glacier Deep Archive. And so you can take that data and what we'll do is in these next slides talk a little bit about how we might use some of the capabilities that we have. So one example is medical documents. There's over 1 billion of them unstructured clinical documents created every year. And so we can use Amazon Rekognition to scan that data, to simplify data labeling, and to allow you to be able to extract data within and then put that into, say, DynamoDB or an Apple or database of your choice. And then you could also put it into more of a serverless environment and scan that and then be able to do ad hoc queries with Athena, for example. With Amazon Textract, you can take the text and be able to extract the data from scanned documents using OCR. We offer partnerships, and our partnerships with Alfresco and Roche allow you then to be able to package that up and be able to integrate that into medical workflows today. So one example, and I'll end on this with storing many, many, many petabytes of data on AWS today is Philips. So Philips Healthcare has their Health Suite data platform on AWS. And today, and this is a little bit old, so it's over this right now, but they had 40 petabytes when the slide was created within the last 6 months. And so they're growing that at about a petabyte per month of data, storing it on AWS. So again, this is a great example of storing patient healthcare information using some of the capabilities that we talked about today and offering that as a service. And Philips, along with dozens of other partners and providers, are using AWS and our solutions today. So hopefully, when we're coming back to Gala and what we talked about today, we're super excited about, archive is like, wow, it's cold, it's not useful. What we've introduced today with S3 Glacier Instant Retrievals allows you now to instantly access any of that data that's been archived, up to 4 times per year is generally what we recommend for instant retrievals, with millisecond access at 0.4 of a cent in major regions. So that's super, super exciting for us. We've integrated that instant retrieval into S3 Intelligent Tiering. So S3 Intelligent Tiering, before today, had our S3, our infrequent access tier, and now has the instant retrieval tier. And to date, if you saw our opening and our keynote yesterday, customers up to today, even before the introduction of instant retrievals, to date have saved $250 million using our intelligent tiering technology. So if you're not using intelligent tiering today, you should be. That's the key message. So definitely take a look at that. And then also with instant retrievals, now you don't have to make the trade-offs of, well, do I want to move it to a flexible retrieval tier, Glacier tier, or do I want to keep it at a millisecond access tier? You get the best of both worlds with Glacier Instant Retrieval. You can access those, but at a very low cost. And then integrated into intelligent tiering, it's a no-brainer, because what we'll do, as Gala talked about, is move that down to the lowest cost tier as objects are not used. And then as they are and heat up, we'll move them to the higher tiers again. We introduced the Glacier Flexible Retrievals cost reductions, and then also for use cases where, say, for example, you're in media or healthcare and you want to process, say, images or genomic data, once a year, a couple times a year, we offer bulk retrievals for free now. So we've lowered the cost on that asynchronous tier of Glacier, now called Glacier Flexible Retrievals, and also made those bulk retrievals free. And then finally, for real cost efficiency for those long-lived archived assets, highly durable, highly secure S3 Glacier Deep Archive with that longer retrieval time, but very low cost, less than $1 per terabyte in most major regions. So hopefully with that, you've taken at least, I think we're successful if we give one little nugget that you can take away from these sessions for you to take home. And I want to thank my co-presenter, Gala, and I thank you for your time today. And we can take some questions maybe afterwards, one-on-one. Have a great rest of your show. Thank you.